Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Brad. How you doing today, Brad?
Things are good over here. Just rained all day yesterday, so kind of enjoyed that. That doesn't happen all that often here in Utah. So I'm with family, but what about you?
Pretty good. Did a rafting trip on the Delaware River yesterday, so a little sore from that. But other than that, it was a good day. It's been a good weekend so far.
That's good for you.
It's nice to get out, get some sun.
That's awesome, man.
Speaking of doing fun things, today we wanted to talk about the idea of no regrets. And I know that this is something that you brought up as a topic. So I'm going to hand it over to you and kind of let you kick it off here and get the ball rolling.
Yeah, of course. So I was listening to a podcast the other day. They're having a really interesting conversation about how you'll feel on your deathbed. Right? Like there's this, it's pretty commonplace within the world when people die, when they pass from this life, that they spend a lot of time sitting on their deathbed in regret for things that they could have done and didn't, for opportunities they could have taken and wouldn't. And it really got me thinking about this concept of living life with no regrets, because we've only got one shot at this thing, right? Every day you wake up is one day closer to death. It's a very finite thing. And that can be very sobering. It can be kind of haunting. And that really means we've got to be intentional with how we live life now. So this concept of regrets has really been just eating at me. How does one live a life where you're never not going to have regrets? But how does one live a life where those regrets can be as minimized as possible? So to start, that's a very broad concept. But to start, Dan, I just wanted to think back on I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Let's just say you woke up tomorrow on your deathbed. How would you feel?
That's an open-ended question, but yeah.
Yeah.
If I woke up on my deathbed tomorrow, the things that I would regret most are things that happened further back. And the reason I say that is because as I've kind of gone down this personal improvement journey, whether it's a conscious or unconscious thing, I'm not sure, but I've started to live this way where I treat people the way that they should be treated regardless of the situation, or I try to do that as much as possible. You know, I'm not perfect. I try to take advantage of opportunities that come my way as much as possible, even though I may not want to, or I may be afraid of them, or it may not be the easy route. But early on in life, I would say in my early 20s into, even borderline 30, I didn't do that all the time. I was kind of a jerk. Sometimes I was not always doing things that made sense in the mindset of, if an opportunity came up and it was either something I had to get in shape for, or something I had to spend more money on, or something it would just be uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form, I would typically find a reason not to do it. So what I'm getting at is, as I've progressed through this journey of self-improvement, I think that my regrets have diminished further and further. There's still a lot of things that I still want to do that I would regret not doing if I woke up on my deathbed right now. But as far as things in the past, I think that my regrets are more of a distant memory than a current memory, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No, of course. Like, when I think of the concept of regret, I always distill it back to this idea of the things that I regret the most are really twofold. One, it's presence. I look back on so many instances in my life where my kids, because my kids are still small enough that they love dad and they want to play with dad, they come up to me and they say, "Hey, Dad, let's play." And I'm busy looking at my phone, looking at whether it be a sports score or a conversation going on or dealing with a work email. There are times where I could have spent more time with my family and I got sucked into something at work that really could have waited. Yes, I think from a professional standpoint, there are things that need to get done, but we all know that there's a line there. So it's not being fully present for them. And I think another regret that I have is a hesitancy or a resistance to doing big shit, like adventures, trying new things, doing something outside of my comfort zone simply due to fear or general discomfort. Case in point, here I am in my late 30s now, and I've been wanting and entertaining the idea of wanting to start to hunt, and it's gotten delayed and it's gotten delayed. And this past year, I had an opportunity to really get myself in a situation where I could get the gear, go out there, even if it was on my own, and it's not going to happen. I'm going to regret that. I'm going to regret procrastinating and putting that off and not being intentional enough about that for a long time. And it's things like that that I really think about. You know, the smaller moments that don't really matter that allow you to deviate course from the bigger moments that do matter, if that makes sense.
It does. Let me ask you this before we get too deep into this topic.
Yeah.
Do the regrets in your life weigh heavy on your heart? Do they bother you? Do you think about them a lot?
So, yeah. I admittedly, when it comes to presence with my kids, it weighs heavily on me. You know, there are times I look at it and I'm thinking, my kids are in this stage of life where life is filled with wonders and magic and all this other stuff. And they're in a position where they look at me and I'm their hero. And when I'm not able to do that, or when I let them down, or if I make them cry because I make a poor choice and say something rude, it hurts. And yeah, of course, the adventure component hurts as well. Now, is this to say that my life is completely filled with regrets and I'm nothing but failure? Of course not. But there are things that I've wanted to do that I've allowed the minutia of life to impact. And it's something I think about a lot.
So this is going to be an interesting point then, because I think that we're coming from the idea of regret slightly differently.
Yeah.
In the sense that I regret things. I have regrets. I've talked in the past about how when my kids were little, I wasn't always present for them. How I spent most of my 20s just having a good time and not really paying attention to my health and drinking on the weekends and stuff like that, whatever. I regret that, but it doesn't spend much, if any, time in my consciousness. It doesn't weigh heavy on my heart because I have a mindset of it's in the past. It's something that I can't change. All I can control is the future. So I can learn from those situations, and I don't know how else to say this, but I can say that I regret them, but there's no like emotional tie to it so much as just a learning situation that I can improve on going forward.
Yeah. So the question for you becomes, was there a transition to get to that mindset? Was there something that caused you to release that emotional component? Or is that simply just the passage of time? Like, what is that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I really don't know. I don't remember a time in my life where I really like hung on to regrets and where it would really bother me and really kind of like weigh me down. I think I always viewed the past as something that's, I don't know if always is the right word, but I can't remember a time where I didn't view the past as something that's happened, something that's unchangeable, something that's set in stone, and something that I can either be doomed to repeat or I can change my future actions based on, what I did and the outcomes that occurred in the past. So regrets to me is a funny thing. There are things that I regret. I regret, not spending time with both of my grandfathers who were World War II veterans and sitting down and really kind of hearing their stories and understanding where I came from and what those men did. But it's also, it's not something I can change. It's not something I can go back and fix. So I don't spend a lot of mental capital thinking about that. I regret, like I said, the time with my kids when they were little. I think I did a pretty good job, but there was a lot of instances where I fell down, and I regret that. I'm trying to make up for it now by being a more present father every day. But it doesn't weigh heavy on my heart. It doesn't bother me. I am who I am because of those situations and because of those choices that I made. And my only option going forward is to be a better man and make better choices. And I can learn from those situations.
That's interesting. That's a conscious decision that you've made that, yeah, I can't change the past, but I'm blazing trails in my present and in my future. And that's something I think men lack, right? Like, I expose some vulnerability in terms of how I feel. Yeah. Am I going to argue that I feel that way all the time? No, but it weighs on me sometimes. And it brings me back. There's a mutual friend of ours that a couple of years ago, I was having some interesting conversations with him because he was obsessed with this concept of FOMO, right? Like the fear of missing out. And he was reading a lot of books about Navy SEALs and Napoleon and George Washington. And he was just reading all these books about these very impressive historical figures. And he was a bit of a cynic and a pessimist. But when he was reading all of that, he's like, he was also very much a nihilist. Like, I really like the guy, but he had a very negative outlook on life. And I remember having these conversations with him about, I'm none of these people. I'm not accomplishing anything. I'm not getting anything done. I'm just an insignificant speck in the universe. I'm never going to be these things. And he was really dealing with some very intense FOMO, like really very intense. And it put him into a pretty depressed mental state. And that to me was something I've always thought about. And when I talked to him, I told him, here's your opportunity to do things anew, take challenges, take some steps. He's like, no, I can't do it. My career is never going to allow me to do that. I can't do that because my wife won't allow me to do these things. I've had conversations with her in the past, and she said absolutely not. And he almost felt stuck and hopeless. But I also remember thinking, and to this day, I think a lot about the fact that he allowed himself to think that way. He told himself and he convinced himself that his wife wasn't going to allow that his career wasn't going to allow that. And how many opportunities he missed out on to grow and to progress and do some of those things that he said he wanted to do simply out of fear. You can call it obligation. You can call it any number of things. But the fact of the matter is he allowed himself to be completely and utterly paralyzed by these subconscious decisions that he made, which allowed his life to be filled with incredible regret and this incredible fear of missing out that ultimately led him down a pretty dark path. And I think a lot of men in general are like that.
Was that a case of him having a no regrets mentality, or was that a case of him just making a ton of covert contracts and not even having conversations?
It was a little bit of both, I think. I would talk to him and say, hey, have you talked to your wife about these things? Yeah. But I don't necessarily know if he was telling me the truth, if he actually had. There are probably a lot of unspoken expectations that covert contracts create.
Yeah.
I also think that he didn't necessarily enjoy what he was doing for a living. He didn't necessarily enjoy the trajectory he was on. So he allowed himself to just find misery in his circumstances. But bigger picture, that's something a lot of men go through. It's this idea of, oh, my life sucks, my job sucks, it's always going to suck. And that leads down a slippery slope of regret in the end.
Yeah, I mean, as men, we take on that mantle of the provider and the protector a lot. And because of that, we feel that we are not allowed to expand and do things necessarily that we want to do. Kind of goes back to our last episode where we talked about prioritizing ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But the idea of no regrets ties in very nicely with there, because to me, we have to place some priority on ourselves and making sure that we are healthy first, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and then we can help others. It's that whole concept of, when the masks fall in the airplane, you take care of yourself first. The no regrets part ties in that we run out of time. So maybe we don't have time to go on those adventures that we want to go on. We don't have time to have the conversations that we want to have, like I mentioned with my grandfathers, or we don't have the time to, whatever it is, do those things that we feel would be fulfilling in life. And the balance there is making sure that the people in your life understand you need to prioritize self first, but you also need to live a life where you find fulfillment. And the idea of a fulfilled life and a no regrets life, I think, go hand in hand in that aspect.
I couldn't agree more. You think a lot about fulfillment. You think a lot about living with regret. I truly believe that so many men have regrets because there are things that they want to do, they choose not to do for whatever reason. Oh, that's something I'll do next year. Like me and the hunting thing. I wanted to do it this year. It's not even too late for me to do it this year. Oh, I'm just going to punt it to next year. I'm going to do this down the road. Here's some big hairy ass goal that I have 6 months in the future or a year in the future. Why are you not starting to plan on that today? What is holding you back on changing your trajectory today? You look back on how much you regret, like as I was talking about earlier, I regret when I look at my phone when I'm with my kids. What am I going to start doing today to effectively change that? And that really if you distill that down, that comes to this concept of presence. Presence means living in the moment. What am I going to do now to make sure that my future is better? To make sure that these goals, these dreams, these aspirations I have the back of my heart, back of my head, in my heart, these goals and aspirations I have in my heart can be fulfilled. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you something. I'm thinking about a lot about this. What is a big, hairy-ass goal? What is a dream? What is something you really want to do before it's all said and done and you kick the bucket? What's atop that bucket list?
Well, I was laughing because as soon as you brought up big hairy ass goals and being present and all this stuff, I was thinking about, we're in a group chat with a bunch of our friends, and we're talking about a hunting fishing trip of a lifetime in Montana.
Bonanza,
yeah. And my immediate reaction to that is something I would love to do, but immediately I'm going, financially I can't afford it. Time-wise, I can't afford it. Like I'm thinking of all these roadblocks to put in my way to just say no to. And that to me, like a week, 10 days, whatever we're talking about here, of hunting and fishing in arguably the last bastion of the Wild West in the US is something that would be a trip of a lifetime for me. And I'm finding all these ways to say no to it. Whereas I haven't even talked to my wife about it, because I don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one thing that is, something that I want to do before it's all said and done. And it's actually something I was thinking about earlier, because, we're talking about regrets and we're talking about things in the future and pushing things. You're talking about pushing things off and pushing things off. There's going to be a point in life where we can't do those things. Either we're not physically capable anymore because we're too old. We're not in good enough health because, age just, listen, we're all going to get old. We're all going to die. We're all afflicted with that, that. And there's things that have a timetable that you need to do in life. That's one of them. One of the other ones for me is I've always been fascinated with the Appalachian Trail, or Appalachian Trail, however you want to say it. I don't think at this point in life that I want to do the whole thing, but there are certain parts that I'd love to section hike. So I would love to section hike from, like, say, the Massachusetts border to the Maine border, or all the way up through Katahdin. So basically all of, or most of New England. I would like to section hike other certain areas of it. I would like to do, like, the Long Trail in Vermont. There's a long trail in New York as well. Just some of these shorter, either section hikes of longer trails or just shorter through hikes. Just as a test of my capability, my endurance, my ability to quote unquote survive, all that stuff. But I'm starting to time out now. At 43 years old, I'm not anywhere near done. But, when I was in my 20s and started thinking about these, I had probably a 45 to 50 year window to do them. Now that window has reduced by 20, 25 years. So, and, they're still out there in the future somewhere.
Yeah.
Will I ever do them? I don't know. But I have other big hairy ass goals in terms of family too. It's not just me and things that I want to do either solo or with my buddies. There's trips I want to take with the family. There's, listen, I got 2 daughters. My big hairy ass goal is walking both of them down the aisle and being a spry grandfather. That's something that I'm not completely in control of, but I can definitely work my butt off between now and whenever to make sure that I'm not just the grandpa sitting on the couch, and that I might play with my grandkids and stuff like that. So there's certain things that are in control and certain things that I'm working towards, and certain things that are just grandiose ideas in my head. But, the more of those things that we start to chip away at, and I think that's the key sometimes, is chipping away at them. You may not even get there. You may start chipping away and realize that's not really what I want, but I've been chipping away and now I want to go this route, or whatever it is. I think by chipping away and working towards some of these goals, we live a life of, I won't say no, but much fewer regrets.
I'm going to call attention to something. All these big hairy ass goals you talked about, none of them had to do with your career, with answering that email that came in at 5:05 p.m. that you felt needed to be addressed immediately at that time. None of those had anything to do with Instagram or politics or sports scores or any of those things that can drag us down various rabbit holes throughout the day. And when you look at life and how we live it, how many of us spend all of our time obsessing over that email that came in from work that we feel that we have to get taken care of, but really could be handled tomorrow while we're working? How many of us get sucked into the drama of a sports trade, or how many of us get sucked into the latest political this, that, or the other, or something going on in Hollywood. And those moments where we allow ourselves to get sucked in, if you think about it, become thieves of time. How many hours that have combined into weeks, that have combined into months, have been lost when we rabbit hole and get completely sidetracked into those stupid things that don't matter? How many of those things that we allow ourselves to become distracted from might end up preventing us from going on an adventure down an Appalachian Trail, or going on a big, crazy hunting bonanza up in Montana, simply because we allow ourselves to get sidetracked? Yes. Is you working on a work email right now going to take away from potentially going on a trip like that? No. But the culmination of years of repeating this behavior, could that theoretically rob us from opportunities to do things like that? 100%. How many of us look at our screen time report every week and say, oh man, I averaged 7 hours and 17 minutes on my phone this week? 7 hours a day on your phone. And you could have spent that time doing any number of things that would help you prepare for, again, I'm not singling you out because I know you and I talk about these sorts of things, but if you're spending 7 hours a week on your phone, how is that going to help you eventually go hike the Appalachian Trail? Yep. How is that going to eventually help you go out to Montana, go hunting? How is that going to help you be able to walk your daughter down the aisle? It doesn't.
I love that term, thieves of time. I wrote that down. That struck a chord with me. And you're 100% right. Now, what I will say is this. The world needs all kinds. The world needs, in order for our world to function right, we need those guys who their concept of no regret is building a corporate empire.
Yeah.
That's something that they strive for, and that's their goal. We all don't need to be outdoorsmen who want to hike the Appalachian Trail or go on hunts in Montana. That's fine. The world needs, the guys who entertain us, whether it's on Sports Center or in the movies or whatever. And that's where they get their no regret mentality. What, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm getting at here is the world, you need to determine what you get value from and where you get that value and what actions give you that value. So you're right. For me, that extra email is not going to get me towards my hunt in Montana. What that extra email is going to do is provide me with a job that will help finance that trip. But I need to balance my time accordingly and make sure that I'm not just getting so honed in on financing the trip that I don't actually make time to do the trip or plan it with my family or plan it with my friends to make sure that it happens. So there's a balance act that goes along there, and there's a prioritization of action. You need that. You need to be doing some of those things in order to take care of the other ones, I guess is what it comes down to, right? That job is necessary to pay for it. I have a mentality in life. Listen, I am career driven in the sense that I'm always looking for the next thing. I'm always looking to grow. I want to make more money. I want to advance. I've also come to a realization here in the last couple months as I pursue that I look at guys a step, 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of where I'm at. And I'm going, they don't live the life outside of work that I want to be living. So do I really want to make that kind of money and have that kind of responsibility? Or am I comfortable kind of maxing out where I'm at, maybe a little bit more, but having the free time to do the things that I want to do? There's a balancing act there for sure, right? I could afford the stuff that I want to do much more if I make the advancements, take on the added responsibility, and make more money. But will I have the time? Will I have the freedom? Do I want to be chained to work as much as those guys are, where they're on call on the weekends, answering emails at all hours of the day and night, taking responsibility for huge situations? Or do I want to, live my life the way I want to live it?
And this is not to vilify somebody who wants to live that life.
Absolutely not.
That's part of their vision. That's part of what they want. Like if they're going to look back on life at the end of when it's all said and done, their regret very well could have been, I could have done more in my career. I could have achieved more.
Yeah, that's an important point. It's about defining, sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you off. It's about defining what provides happiness and fulfillment to you in your life.
Exactly. I had a boss, a manager, in a previous life when I worked in financial services, and I was kicking around the idea of working for Goldman Sachs. If anybody works in the finance field, at some point they probably entertain working for Goldman. And Goldman very much has a reputation of long hours, stressful work environment. A lot of people work there for years and thrive, make a lot of money, they're happy, but for other people, it's not necessarily a good fit. And I was weighing the pros and cons. And I'm somebody who finds a lot of joy in spending time with my family, being present with them. And I was talking to my manager about it when I was working at this other company, and he was really forthcoming with me. He's like, "Hey man, I've got a cousin who's worked at Goldman Sachs for 25 years. He hardly sees his family. They take huge vacations every year, 2-week vacations to Australia, to Africa. They have a huge house. They have a very good life, but he hardly sees his kids during the week because he's working 60, 70, 75, 80 hours a week every week, and he has for 20 years. And he was telling me I had to make a decision in my life whether I wanted to provide for my family or be there for my family. And I chose, and I don't regret choosing, that I wanted to be able to provide for my family. And that's a decision he made. I wouldn't have made that same decision. I would rather make enough money to have a comfortable life and still be able to be there for my family. But everybody's different. Different strokes for different folks. And coming back to your point, it is so important for us to be able to identify what those regrets look like. And that's why I wanted to kick around and entertain the idea of the big, hairy ass goal. What are some things when you close your eyes at night that you dream of doing in your future? Let those essentially be your North Star, if you will, to help you live a life without regret.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've actually got a friend, and I'm sure he won't listen to this, so I can talk about it a little bit, who is very much like that guy that you just described, in that he's actually the epitome of the American dream. He came over. He's my wife's best friend's husband. He came over from overseas. They met when she was studying abroad, and long story short, he's become a CEO of in a very important industry. I'm trying to obviously be very broad here because his story is not mine to tell. And he and I have had conversations about this, and he said, I've had to make this decision where I can either give my wife and my kids the life that I'd never had and never even dreamed was possible, or I can be present. And he is actually doing a very, very good job of balancing the two. He's because of COVID situation, but he's able to work out of his house now. So he's physically more present. But I mean, you can imagine as somebody in his position, he's constantly traveling. He's constantly on phone calls. He's constantly responding to email. Even when he's present, he's tethered to his phone. But they go on great vacations. They've got a beautiful house. They don't lack for anything. And it's a balancing act. But he also strives for that. That is his North Star. He is a very driven person, and his idea of success or success in life is corporate success. He has other things outside of that, fitness and whatnot, that he strives for, but his primary goal is providing for his family, setting his kids up so that they are just set for life, and then being able to provide and eventually retire relatively young. Now, I don't think he'll actually ever retire. He's the kind of guy who he enjoys work. He enjoys the challenges that come at this level. But I always joke with my wife, I'm like, you chose wrong. Like you chose the guy who's around all the time, but doesn't bring home the bacon. She argues that, she's like, I would not be happy. She goes, my friend is happy in that situation. She's got the material things that she wants. And my wife's like, I'm not a material person. She's not. She goes, I want the family structure. I want this. I want that. So this is a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but it goes back to the message that we were talking about, whereas you have to find your North Star. You have to find what again, I'm going to go back to this word, garner fulfillment from in life, and then determine the things that get you there and prioritize those and make sure that you don't have any regrets with regards to that. The rest of it can fall by the wayside, because if it's not bringing you fulfillment and it's just something that has to occur in life, or it's not bringing you fulfillment and it doesn't help you reach your goal, then it doesn't need to have your top priority and your concern. Yeah. I say that with the caveat too of it. There are some things that if they fell to the wayside, I would consider you're not being a good man. If your family in general falls to the wayside, now we've talked about two guys who are very successful in corporate and don't spend much time with their family. That's fine. If the time that you have away from work that's limited is spent at the golf course, at the bar, away from your family, and you're not present with your family, then that's a problem. if you're not a good husband, if you're stepping out on your wife, regardless of what your goals and stuff are, that's a problem. So while those things may not be the ultimate top priority for you, there are things in life where you're not going to be a good man unless you take care of them, period, end of story.
Yeah. That was exactly where I was going to go with that. Regret is, yeah, you might choose the career path, but there are regrets if you're not there for your family. What are you going to regret more? That you missed out on going to the bar with your buddies, or that you missed out on your son's t-ball game?
Right.
Unless you're a complete sociopath, it's going to be that you missed out on your son's t-ball game. That in and of itself is a life of no regrets. It's identifying what you want, how you're going to get there, and then making sure that you're doing everything in your power to get there, starting now.
Mm-hmm.
While not putting that which is most important by the wayside. Your wife, your kids, your faith in God, those things should never fall by the wayside. And, lest we forget, because it wouldn't be our show without it, your fitness. Fitness cannot, under any circumstances, fall by the wayside. Faith, family, fitness.
I think that's an important thing. And guys will shirk at that. It does. I don't need to be in shape. I can have the dad bod. I can have this bullshit. Listen, I don't care if you like working out or not. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. I don't care if you like working out or not. I don't care if you like eating healthy or not. You have to do it. And the reason you have to do it is not because you're going to be a fit guy. I don't give a shit if you're a fit guy or not. I give a shit if you can play with your kids. I give a shit if you're going to be there alive to walk your daughter down the aisle. I give a shit if you're able to go on vacation with your wife when you're both retired and you're actually able to walk around and enjoy wherever you go. I give a shit if you're not stuck in the hospital having a heart attack at 50 years old. That's why we work out. Now, some of us have narcissistic tendencies and we want to look like Greek gods. Great. More power to you. But all of us need to work out as men so that we are physically fit and present and able to survive situations and able to be there and be present and be active in situations. I can't tell you how much it hurts me to watch, and I love him to death, but to watch my father-in-law sit on the couch and not be able to do certain things. Or my father too, right? My father, God bless him, he doesn't listen to these. So whatever, I'm going to tell his story a little bit too. But my dad's just turned 70. He's got 2 fake knees, a fake hip, and rods in his back. Now, a lot of that is due to being a self-employed plumber for 40 plus years and doing stupid stuff like strapping cast iron tubs to his back, carrying him up a ladder and walking into the side of a house on the second floor. He was admittedly dumb when he did stuff like that. And he worked his butt off to provide for his family, which I completely and 100% respect. But my dad, who was a bulldog of a man, I mean, at 5'9", this guy was the strongest guy I've ever met. He was built like a fire plug and he could just do anything. Has such nerve damage and stuff now because he didn't take care of his body that he can barely open a pickle jar. He can't do nearly the things that he used to do outside around the house. And that's kind of his thing, is just puttering around the house. And even the thing that he loves most in the world, fishing, is something that he doesn't find as much enjoyment in because of dexterity in his fingers, because of just getting down to the boat and stuff like that. That's why we stay in shape. We stay in shape to enjoy our lives. And so that we have no regrets in all aspects of our lives, to tie it back into the topic. It's not to be the Greek god who gets all the women and just looks like, an amazing specimen. You want to do that? Awesome. I got no qualms against it. We got a former guest on the show who just competed in a bodybuilding contest, and I think it's amazing what he's doing. We don't have to look like that, but you have to prioritize your physical fitness so that you have no regrets later in life. And I don't care what those regrets or those things of fulfillment are that you would have regrets over. Physical fitness, being physically fit, will never cause you to have regrets.
What will cause you to have regrets? We've all seen them. Those guys puttering around at Walmart or in the neighborhood that are obese. They're usually in one of those motorized carts. They have an oxygen tank, and they're not that much older than us.
Yeah.
That is a man who, I guarantee you, lives in regret. Let's not be that. And let's start today. We don't have to have everything figured out today. But if you want to live a life without regrets, start moving that needle and start taking action today. This isn't something that can wait. This isn't something like, oh yeah, I'll start that at the beginning of 2023. New Year's resolutions are total bunk. They're shit because that allows us the opportunity to defer and forgive ourselves.
Why wait?
Start now.
Why are you waiting?
There's a quote that I heard. It was from a leader in my church. He gave it in a talk years ago. I think about this all the time. He said, if we live only for tomorrow, we'll have a lot of empty yesterdays today. That's regret. Let's do it now.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. I mean, I got nothing else to add to that at this point. It is absolutely about being present in life and making decisions going forward that fulfill you and just provide happiness. Well, as always, Brad, it's, these conversations are great. I love having them with you. I love, especially when we get a little fired up, or I get a little fired up.
You got fired up, and I loved it.
So, to the guys listening, we really appreciate you listening. Hit us up on social media. We want to know, excuse me, for the guys listening, we want to hear what's going on with you guys. Hit us up on social media. We want to know things that your big hairy ass goals in life, the things that you're shooting for. We can even talk about some of the regrets that you may have and how you handle them. I'm curious if the regrets are something that you dwell on, or if they're something that or something that you think are just in the past and that you can just learn from. So, reach out to us. Instagram is where Brad and I are most active, but we've also got a Facebook group that is slowly gaining a little bit of traction here. You can find all of those on untamingmasculinity.com, as well as the show notes for this and all of our other podcasts. The other thing that we ask you to do is please reach out on your podcast player and give us a 5-star rating and review. That helps us get the podcast out to all the men who need to hear this message. So as always, thanks again. Please make sure you're listening next week for our next episode. And until then, we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?